I stepped out of the taxi, the gravel crunching beneath my boots as I set foot on the ground I hadn't seen in over 11 months. My uniform still carried the dust of Afghanistan, a reminder of the months I spent away, dodging bullets, facing danger, leading recon patrols, and rescuing civilians. But today was supposed to be different. Today I was home. I was going to surprise my mom, walk into that small white house with the blue shutters, and sleep in my own bed for the first time in nearly a year. But that's not what I saw. Instead of the home I'd left behind, I was staring at a dog park fenced in, with 3 golden retrievers chasing a frisbee across what had once been my front yard. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, and thought maybe the taxi had dropped me off at the wrong house. But then I saw a tree. The tree I carved my name into before I left. It was still standing, its scars just as familiar as the one on my heart. But my yard? It was gone. The place that had once been home was now a park, a playground for people who had no idea what they were standing on. The HOA sign was the first clue that something was very, very wrong. It read, "Saw Willow Ridge Community Park sponsored by the Homeowners Association SAW." Beneath it, a plaque saw dedicated to peaceful living and communal joy. Saw peaceful living, huh? I stood there frozen, staring at the very ground where I'd played as a kid, where my mom used to sit on the porch swing, the same swing that was now gone, replaced by a couple of poodles and some lady in yoga pants scolding them for sniffing my duffel bag. I asked a passing couple what happened to my house. The man barely looked at me and casually said, "Some government guy didn't pay his taxes. HOA took the land." He walked off, sipping his smoothie, oblivious that I was the government guy he was talking about. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't rage but more like disbelief wrapped in exhaustion. I'd been overseas, protecting people I didn't know, fighting battles in places I couldn't even pronounce. And now, back home, the enemy wasn't wearing a uniform. No, it was wearing designer sunglasses and running neighborhood committees. I spent the next few hours running between city offices like a pinball machine. Every place I went, the story was the same. According to the system, I had lost my land 6 months ago due to tax delinquency. But I had filed for military tax exemption before I left. The clerk looked confused and told me to go talk to the HOA. That's when I heard her name for the first time: Karen Mallister, president of Willow Ridge. Apparently, she was passionate about keeping the neighborhood tidy and compliant. I found her in the community clubhouse, holding court like a queen, sipping a glass of wine, surrounded by a few elderly residents who nodded in agreement at whatever she said. There were certificates on the wall, self-awarded, of course, and a blown-up portrait of herself, titled SAW Founding Mother SAW. She was in the middle of scolding a teenager for hanging fairy lights on a backyard fence when I walked in. She didn't even look up until I cleared my throat. When I introduced myself and told her I used to own the property at 1428 Maple Trail, she blinked, like I'd just insulted her interior design. Then the smirk. You know the one. That Karen smirk. Oh yes, that lot was unclaimed, delinquent, and was transferred to the HOA, she said, flipping through a file as if I wasn't even standing there. When I told her about my military tax exemption, she cut me off mid-sentence. "Maybe you should have thought of that before joining the army and abandoning your responsibilities," she said with a venomous sweetness. There was a silence so thick you could have heard her ego inflating. I reminded her of the federal law that protected deployed service members from losing property due to tax non-payment. She offered me another lot in the back of the neighborhood near the dumpsters. "We can work something out, soldier," she said, like she was doing me a favor. That night, I couldn't sleep. I drove to a motel on the edge of town, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for hours. My body was home, but my soul was still out there, fighting this war in my own backyard. The next morning, I reached out to Luis Ortega, an old friend who worked in cyber investigations for a federal agency. He owed me a favor from when I pulled him out of a burning convoy. I told him what happened, and within hours, he was DVYing into public records. What he found was a tangled web of forged signatures, retroactive meeting notes, and land sales involving shell companies tied directly to Karen's cousin. The HOA had created a fake paper trail that looked legitimate on the surface, but when Luis dug deeper, it all came crashing down. They'd waited for me to leave, then forged documents, and sold the land to Karen's cousin's company. The rage that had been simmering in me for months finally started to rise. I thought about taking them to court, but legal battles would take years. Karen had layers of protection money, lawyers, influence. I needed something quicker, something louder, something dramatic. I remembered a conversation I had with Colonel Trent during my last deployment. He told me if I ever needed anything back home, I could call him directly. I didn't think I'd ever cash in that favor. But this felt different. This wasn't just a property dispute. This was a betrayal by the very people I'd sworn to protect. I called him, explained everything. He didn't hesitate. He just said, "Send me the GPS coordinates and a list of structures involved." Then he added, "You want this quiet or dramatic?" I didn't even hesitate. "Dramatic," I replied. And so, the plan was born. 3 weeks later, they would learn exactly what it felt like to have their lives bulldozed, just like they did to me. I spent the next few days neck-deep in blueprints, satellite images, and zoning maps. Luis built a file so thick it could serve as a doorstop. We found out Karen had been expanding her HOA kingdom illegally. Several homes were built on what used to be protected wetlands. A shed near the dog park was built on a sewer easement. Even their clubhouse? It was technically half a foot onto municipal land. But I wanted more than just leverage. I wanted a statement. Luis dug through archived emails and found one where Karen mocked military families, calling us unpredictable and undesirable homeowners. That was the moment. I printed it out, pinned it to my motel wall next to a photo of my old house. It wasn't just my land they stole. It was my memories. I went to the courthouse, met with Judge Margot Winslow. She was sharp, a former JAG officer, and someone who had a soft spot for soldiers caught in domestic nightmares. She looked through the EVY Denke and said, "Someone's going to jail if this hits the media." But she also told me something important. The HOA had money, lawyers, and influence. A legal VY Tory would be slow. They'd drag it out for years. When I asked if there was a way to have a federal entity temporarily seize the land for investigation, her eyes lit up. It would take a specific type of federal oversight, she said. Something involved VYing national security or public SARE VYC abuse. I didn't need to be told twice. I called Colonel Trent again. "Can we get a military training exercise on disputed land?" I asked. He chuckled. "Well, damn, that's bold." But he agreed. The military could run a live training simulation on the land. It would be completely legal. Within 24 hours, the plan was approved. It was called Operation CIVYC Shield. The military would take over the disputed land for a weekend-long training operation, simulating urban conflict response and disaster recovery. Karen had no idea what was coming. The first convoy rolled into Willow Ridge just as the sun was rising. Residents stood in their driveways, confused, sipping their coffee as Humvees rolled past their hydrangeas. Karen stepped out in her silk robe, holding a mug that read "Queen Bee of the Ridge." She blinked twice, completely unprepared for what she was seeing. Camouflage tents went up in the park. Soldiers were hammering stakes into the ground, taking soil samples, and studying the land. Helicopters flew overhead, landing in what used to be the HOA's prized meditation garden. Karen marched across the lawn, demanding to know what was going on. A soldier handed her a packet. As she skimmed through it, her face went from pink to crimson. The paper read, "Saw federal assessment of land ownership and temporary occupation approval granted." Saw. Her voice cracked. "You can't do this," she shouted. But no one was listening. I walked up to her, calmly said, "That land you stole? It's coming back to me, piece by piece." She tried to argue, but I reminded her that her entire Subdivision was built on fraudulent claims. I asked her when she last had her property lines inspected. She didn't answer. The soldiers wasted no time. They set up perimeters around the pool, the clubhouse, and the community garden, all on land obtained fraudulently. Karen barricaded herself inside the clubhouse at one point, but the soldiers just walked in. They opened the door like it was nothing. Her precious community room became a military command post. The residents were in chaos. Some protested, some cried, others just packed their things in silence. Luis kept feeding me updates. Karen's cousin was under investigation. She was being dragged into the mud. As the military set up camp, Karen's empire crumbled. She was no longer the queen. She was a criminal, facing charges of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. That night, I stood on the land where my house once stood. The soldiers had cleared space, marked the foundation. And instead of bitterness, I felt something else, a quiet VY Tory. The war for my home wasn't over yet, but I'd won. And by the end of the week, Willow Ridge wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a Cymbola place that had been stolen and now reclaimed. The land was mine again, and the story of how it was taken back would be one of the greatest VY Tories of my life. So, let me ask you, when justice is on the line, when something that's rightfully yours is taken, how far would you go to get it back? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and share this story. Let's keep spreading the truth.